What happened in 70 AD? What happened? So he came back and
the shattering of the holy people. The shattering of the holy people that you're just reading, their altars were destroyed.
Let me provide a little bit of context for you guys so that you guys can better understand this disagreement. The start of this debate began with me challenging Corey Minor on his futurist eschatology. I pointed to him to Matthew chapter 24, particularly verse 30 and verse 34, noting that a futurist paradigm and eschatology is irreconcilable with the time statements that Jesus provided there. The reason for that is because futurists claim that Jesus is going to come in our future. However, Jesus was speaking to his first century apostles, and he told them in verse 30 that he would come. And in verse 34, he says that all those things, which would include the second coming, would take place before the passing of that generation. He wasn't referring to our generation. So that would mean that Jesus was to return before the passing of that first century generation. Now back to the video.
Their temple was destroyed. They haven't had a priesthood for almost 2,000 years. And they lost their genealogical records. That whole kingdom has been destroyed. And since then has emerged a whole Judaism that's not biblical Judaism. And so they lost that kingdom, and that kingdom.
The second point I'd like to make is that what led up to this point was that Corey diverted our attention away from the immediate context in Matthew 24, and he ended up citing Daniel chapter 12 in order to prove his point. Here's the specific time within the video to demonstrate my point.
But now let's go back to what Daniel said. He said that, and as soon as they finish shattering the people of the holy people, all these events will be completed. As for me, but I cannot understand. Now he said at that point in time, they will understand. Look what he says. For the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished, the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. So now, here's the question, and we can go to Zechariah. We don't have time for it. We go to Zechariah 12 and Zechariah 14. We see the end of these things happening. What comes after that? At the very end is the end, and the Lord returns. That did not happen.
Shall we turn our attention to Daniel chapter 12 and parallel it with Matthew chapter 24 to demonstrate that these things have in fact happened and they occurred within the first century? Point number one, we know that Jesus in Matthew chapter 24 is providing for us a direct citation of Daniel chapter 12. How do I know this? Well, let's read Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. In that verse, Matthew himself is letting us know that Jesus is drawing directly from Daniel. And I quote, "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand." That's point number one, to demonstrate that Jesus is drawing from Daniel. Point number two, Jesus speaks about the Great Tribulation with the same exact phraseology as does Daniel in Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 says, "And there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time." And Jesus says in Matthew chapter 24 verse 21, "For then there will be a great tribulation such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will." In addition, Matthew chapter 24 verse 15 speaks about the abomination of desolation. And Daniel chapter 12 verse 11 speaks about the abomination that causes desolation. Matthew chapter 24 verse 3 and verse 14 speaks about the end of the age. And Daniel chapter 12 verse 13 speaks about the end of the age. Matthew chapter 24 verse 15 speaks about the remnant being saved from that judgment. And then Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 speaks about the remnant being saved and rescued from that judgment. So let's sum it all up. Corey thinks that the shattering of the holy people has not occurred just yet. However, the shattering of the holy people did occur, and it occurred in 70 AD. And according to Daniel chapter 12, what takes place prior to the shattering of the holy people is the Great Tribulation mentioned in Daniel chapter 12 verse 1. But the Great Tribulation in Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 is the Great Tribulation of Matthew chapter 24 verse 21. But then that means the Great Tribulation had occurred within the first century. Because once again, according to Matthew chapter 24, verse 34, Jesus said that all these things, which would include the Great Tribulation, would take place before the passing of that generation. But if the tribulation was fulfilled in the first century, that means also that the abomination of desolation, the end of the age, the shattering of the holy people, and the second coming was all fulfilled in the generation of the first century apostles. But that is the very conclusion that Corey Minor is attempting to disprove, but of which I just now did prove.
Well, what is biblical Judaism? Keeping the law and so forth?
Is Judaism that honors the Levitical sacrifices,
and that wasn't done away with. So they should still be.
That was done away with.
By who?
That was done away.
By who?
By the Lord Jesus himself.
Okay, then so the shattering of the people, you're saying that happened then. That didn't happen then. That happened at the cross.
No, it didn't. So
the law was not nullified at the cross. The law was nullified and done away with in 70 AD.
Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13 says, that which has been made obsolete is waxing old and ready to vanish away. Present tense, a present continuous. And so you have, although made obsolete, it was in process of vanishing away.
Here's one of the points that I wanted to bring up with Corey in the debate, but wasn't able to, that ends up posing a problem for his conclusion that the law was completely annulled at the cross. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 18, "For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished." So if Corey wants to make the point that the law was fully annulled at the cross, then he must also be prepared to inadvertently say that heaven and earth also passed away. And we know that that whole Jewish covenantal world did not pass away until AD 70 at the, quote, destruction of the holy people. End quote. The final remarks that I want to make about the passing of heaven and earth and the consummation of new heavens and new earth is that if you want to find out more about this, I'll put a tab right here in the video if you're watching from YouTube. I provided nearly a 2-hour lecture on how this was all fulfilled. If you're watching from Instagram, I'll put a link in my bio.